Okay, I think this is a great session as everybody get on the stage. Fantastic talk. I want to make 2 points why this is so important, this data. First is related to Karen's meta-analysis. Super clear and consistent. However, there's 2 points methodologically to do this kind of meta-analysis because the heterogeneity is tremendous. Even when you look at each source of the sugar, the so-called water was alluded to, the substitution effect, the displacement effect, and replacement effect from model to model, that reference group might be different. So that is exactly the dangers to doing this kind of meta-analysis, that under the guise of looking at the totality, consistency, and quality of the evidence, but present a highly could be misinformed pictures. So it's very careful to look at the reference group, and I suspect each one of those models you show, the reference group shift. So that kind of make the interpretation of the odds ratio extremely challenging. That's one thing related to the methodological issue. The second comment and question I have, it's related to this rare sugar, this whole new area that I happen to be followed for the past 10 or 20 years. When you look at those data, again, a major component of that, it's related to, again, trace elements. Because if you look at the human genome, there's many metal elements in the human genome, okay? Metal. And metal and trace element often function as a cofactor in those enzymes that convert those rare metals. In fact, the Japanese has been leading this in creating the synthetic rare sugar, okay? And Dr. Khan, that the data you presented in honey, they are also very obviously from region to region, and to a large extent has to do with the trace elements distribution. That's the reason why I think it's so important to look at the balance of those elements. For example, magnesium, manganese, ions, copper, copper, and many of those trace elements are the cofactors of the enzymatic reaction in creating those rare sugars and metabolize those sugars in the body. So these 2 points, if you ignore those, if present as a perfect confounding factor, explaining everything you see there. Okay, thank you.
Okay. There's a question.
I'll just make a wee comment here. Many of those rare sugars are also seen in pectins, which is why I use the plural, in plant cell walls. So they're not unique to honey. They are actually found in other parts of our food source. So that brings in David's point yesterday, it's dietary fibres, and that real diversity that we actually have within dietary fibre.
I have a question which could go to any of the speakers. People assume that the effect of SSB on outcomes, the poor outcomes, compared to other sources of sugar, is something to do with the sugar and something to do with it being liquid. But there are other things in soft drinks. There are thousands of flavour compounds there. And if you think about the fact that most soft drink consumed is actually a cola form, a Coca-Cola form, have those thousands of substances been tested for their safety with respect to the beta cell, with respect to, most safety tests of food additives look at cancer. So,
yeah, that's a good point. John, I think you can answer that, right?
I'm not aware of all the testing, but certainly each ingredient would have to be safe. Now you could argue, is the GRAS process sufficient for that? But EFSA looks at those. All food additives are looked at. And you may have, obviously, biomodification in the gut that gives you other compounds, but a lot of the caramels or the different other components, the phosphoric acid, things like that, those would have to be considered safe to be in those
They
beverages.
have been tested. Because
And there's also teratogenicity, so they look at birth, they look at neurodegenerative, they look at a number of different outcomes when they do the safety testing, preclinical, and then they do the surveillance. So something like aspartame, it's got hundreds of studies, for example, on it as a sweetener, but the other ingredients as well.
But doesn't surveillance tell you that there's something wrong?
Well, we're going to look at that, low-calorie sweeteners, I think, in the next session. And those,
Yeah.
in terms of low-calorie sweeteners, in terms of the other components, I think we can. Walter probably has a comment.
A comment and a couple questions too. That I think it's a reasonable question. For example, there had been concerns about the cola, basically the factors that are in colas. So we have looked at least in a gross way, cola versus non-cola sugar sweetened beverages, and we see pretty similar results. So, it's hard to ignore that you get a huge amount of sugar there in a very short time that doesn't
It's a bomb.
induce. It does,
Glycemic bomb.
It's a
I'm calling
bomb, right?
them.
And it doesn't induce satiety, and you go and
Yeah.
drink out another one too. So, I don't think there's a big mystery that why these are not healthy, but maybe there are other things too on top of that. But those were wonderful talks. And I think the public health takeaway is pretty clear. We really do need to focus on sugar-sweetened beverages where there's no uncertainty about causality and the effects are huge. And at one point, back of the envelope calculation, I estimated that about half of the increase in obesity in the United States could be accounted for by sugar-sweetened beverages. So that's rough, but it's huge. 10% of mortality in Mexico is attributable to sugar-sweetened beverages, where intake is really high. So this is a huge public health issue. And I guess the second big takeaway is that, yes, the starch is a real big issue, and you can have unintended consequences, shifting people to more starch and less sugar. So I think that's not so appreciated, and a really good point. So thank you. But the one thing you didn't really cover, or you mentioned it, that sugar can sort of lead people to consume unhealthy things, but consume other healthy things, but it can also lead you to consume unhealthy things too. So the sweetness issue, I think, wasn't really addressed, and that is potentially serious because if you just compare pure starch with starch plus a little sugar, starch plus a little sugar would have lower glycemic index, but might induce people to eat more unhealthy starch, which if you look at what's on the shelves in stores, a lot of the junk food is some combination of sugar plus starch. So it does have a sort of bait effect there. And I wonder how we think about that. I struggle with that myself.
You go.
I think the recent sweet tooth study, there's so many sweet acronym studies, that Kees de Graaf did, where he had people that were randomized to different levels of sweetness, and what he found was at the end of the study, everybody kind of came back to their sweetness level. So even if you tried to push people to be consuming a higher level of sweetness, they kind of came back to their habitual sweetness level. At least that's what his randomized control trial demonstrated. That's an adult, so we don't know whether or not you develop a sweetness, like how do you develop that baseline level of sweet taste in adulthood, might come at an earlier age at youth, so we're not sure if that's something that could be modified at infancy or as a child. But in terms of the randomized control trials and the meta-analyses, even when you're looking at a source of sugar, whether it's the mixed forms or cereals, in the end, they're showing a reduction in adiposity relative to the control. So I think there's some evidence that it can still have a role. I can take a look to see. We have subgroups looking at starch as the comparator, and the results were fairly consistent. So I think that, at least from the evidence that we've seen, that it some sugar with the starch can still result in a lower adiposity for a substitution.
Yeah, well, I mean, the study would need to be like a year-long study looking at basically how people are, how they, in an ad libitum way, so how do, in the real world, adding that sweetness, clearly it's done because there's no junk food out there that's pure starch. So it does have an attraction.
You think so?
But,
I would, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
oh, go
But
ahead.
I see in children today that rice cakes, they're puffed cakes of just rice, and some of them are called wholemeal as well. But I would gauge that they are empty calories, and that's what they get given. And the assumption is that sweetness is the only gateway to obesity, when I think everyone in this room would say they love pasta, they love potatoes, they love white rice. Because we learn, and this is the work of Scalafini, and it's really lovely work in both humans and animals, that show that we learn as children that to associate certain flavours with a glycemic response in the brain. So starches are associated with the flavours that come with potatoes, come with pasta, and we learn to love them just as much as we love the taste of sweetness. So glycemia and our brains are intricately linked, and it's not just through sweetness. So I think what we've done with children, we've given them the advice in my generation was give them rice cereal. Rice cereal was this finely divided stuff that you mixed with milk, and it had iron added by Nestle, and that was the first food, and it had a GI of about 80, and they were given that 4 or 5, 6 times a day. So I wonder what it did to the brain. It had no sweetness, but I couldn't get it in fast enough into my child. So anyway.
Can I just add to that in the previous conversation? We do forget that caffeine is added to beverages, particularly in the United States. In Australia and New Zealand, it's more tightly regulated, but of course that's addictive. And I think that's, getting back to Jenny's question about what else is in a sugar-sweetened beverage, caffeine is one thing that we know that's probably driving people's desire to have more. So.
Coca-Cola's been the most successful product ever developed worldwide, I think.
Can I
Professor Yang,
quickly...
please? No, but...
Livia?
Yeah, okay. So I have 2 questions. One is for you, because as the regulations, like the labeling, if you say sugars, you're including the lactose, because I think it's a kind of chemistry. If chemistry, you're including lactose. If you say the benefit, maybe no. In China, we have a lot of fighting for that, because I in charge of nutrition labeling and I have claim about that. So I totally say the second one. The second one for Jenny, your presentation is very nice. I think for me, I learned a lot of. But my question is, how about to think about the children and the 3 years old? Because the children mostly to eat a lot of milk powder, I mean infant's formula. In China, we have a lot of problem for that. Maybe % have the teeth problem. Even I cannot replace. So the people working in the hospital, he asked me give some answers.
Yes.
I think. So how to, is increase or decrease something, how is the amount for intake, the sugars? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a really good question. The fact is that, first, yes, fruit and dental caries are associated. Fruit pickers have more dental caries. And we do know that fossils of primates going back 15 and 20 million years show evidence of dental caries, and especially in the incisors, because they held the wad of the food in their mouth for a while. But also that was associated with a jaw that got bigger. So if we weren't eating fruit, our jaw, like we do, children have sliced fruit these days. They don't have to chomp down on anything, so they've all got problems with a jaw that's called overbite. And the reason we get crowded teeth is because this jaw is not getting enough chomping. And fruit is one of the ways we get that jaw developed. But in terms of dental caries, they have shown that our teeth can put up with 6 insults a day, 6 insults. So it comes down to making sure that we don't sip, that we don't have sticky things that stick on the teeth all day. Those little Chupa Chups contain 10 grams of sugar and take about, 30 minutes to consume. So that little bit of sugar does more harm than consuming a whole soft drink in 5 minutes. So it's the dental caries comes down to the form and the frequency, not the amount of sugar. We want them to eat more fruit.